Like many others, Conrad did not plan on joining the war in the mid-1900s. However, he did. Conrad Louis Stefanik was the son of Elizabeth and Michael Stefanik and was born on February 2, 1923. He was one of 9 children, 8 of whom were boys. Many of his brothers were also involved in the war around the same time. His brother Alex was with him in the Navy when he joined. In addition to his brother Alex, his younger brother Steve was a part of the Army in World War II. In addition to his immediate family, he also had several extended family members who were involved in the war. The Stefanik brothers always got along and had a good time while they were with each other. They would mess around and have fun while building a strong family connection. This made it easier for them to go off into the war because they had the support they needed from their family. Conrad had an amazing sense of humor and always stayed positive when no one else did. This carried with him throughout the war, and it helped him keep a positive outlook while on duty. Before his life in the war, Conrad was a great athlete who played basketball and also was a gifted bowler. He had a passion for swimming and swam whenever he was given the chance. Following high school, he became a house roofer. However, after the 3rd time of falling off the roof, he decided to look for a new job. During this time, he was attending college, but dropped out after a year so he could put his brother through architecture school. Conrad always had a passion for airplanes and flying, so he tried to pursue his dream and began pilot lessons. He went to Chicago to take his final test, but it had to be postponed because of the extensive winds. Unfortunately, the day before he was going to get his pilot license, he got called in for war training. He had to visit multiple cities in North Carolina to take classes to become an aviation mechanic in the war. When he was away, he wrote how his mother sent him a sweater and 2 boxes of candy, and his church sent him a plethora of assorted articles and gloves. Once he finished up his classes, he then traveled to Newport News in Virginia to take his aircraft exam in the hospital during the whole month of February in 1944. Conrad had an interest in bodybuilding and kept that goal in mind throughout the war, and tried to exercise as much as possible. He remembered exercising for about a week, then quitting again. After having some downtime, Conrad was placed back in Chicago to attend engineering school. He started the school May 5th of 1944 and ended a few weeks later. While in school, he received word that his brother Alex had been shipped to the Pacific already, and Stanley was to depart overseas as well. Hearing about his brothers being shipped to war was hard, but their courage and spirits made it easy for Conrad to know everything was going to be okay. His life in school was strict, but calm as well. However, one night on June 6th, American troops invaded at 3 a.m. while people were out on the lake. Random invasions occurred every so often, so it was not a huge deal when one did happen. While in school, he again took private flying lessons, which took about 9 weeks to complete. He graduated from the NATTC from Chicago on August 28, 1944. After that, he had a 10-day break until he was scheduled to leave. While waiting for his overseas duty, he went to California and passed the time playing baseball or swimming. During his break, he also visited his brother Fred for New Year's. Fred was just about to be shipped out on the 23rd of January. Conrad heard that he would be shipped out soon as well, and indeed he was. The transportation process had begun on January 24th. On this date, he was sent to the Camp Shoemaker for further transport to Treasure Island. He packed his sea bags the morning of the 24th around 8:30 a.m., then he left the camp at 2 and arrived at Treasure Island at 4 p.m. The island around him was fenced in with guards standing watch all around. When it was time for him to get in line for food, it was 3 blocks long. He mentioned that it was the longest chowder line he had ever waited in, and it wasn't worth the wait because it didn't taste good. On January 26th, Conrad left the United States on a ship called the Granville. The ship was in good condition, and the men were given an adequate supply of food to eat. However, Conrad was seasick most of the way across the Pacific. As they arrived at Pearl Harbor on the 1st of February, the climate was very nice, sunny, and warm. The troops were put into barracks and given mail that had been delivered that day. Conrad always had plenty to eat on the ship. He said,
"Wasn't sick this trip. In fact, it was one of the best times I've had."
However, the weather started to get very hot. The men were not used to these temperatures and were extremely uncomfortable. He was then placed in the receiving barracks for further transfer. In the meantime, he went swimming twice a day. He loved to take in the ocean and swim around it as much as he could. He was in the Marshall Islands during this time and remembered seeing at least 3,000 dead Japanese on the one island. A Navy spokesman from Japan stressed the importance between Japanese trade with the military and Navy. However, this was not as effective as they had planned it to be. There were enemy Japanese on the island, but they couldn't do anything because they ran out of supplies. They had no means of obtaining any more, so they were not a threat. Also, he wrote,
"Every so often, we fly over and bomb their island."
This was a normal day for troops located on the Marshall Islands. However, one time Conrad wrote about an experience in which
all hell broke loose.
he described the smell of smoke, old blood and guts, death, and the green eyes of his enemy.
The battle had begun.
The living situations on the island were not ideal, but they served a good purpose. All the soldiers could only have 1 bucket of water a day, not including the drinking water, which ran out of a spigot so it wouldn't run. The barracks the men lived in were made of wood, with 4 walls and screens in place of windows. He mentioned there were cobwebs scattered around the living quarters. Since he loved to swim, he adventured around and found a nice coral that he could swim in. Some of the other troops went swimming with him as well. Conrad wasn't directly involved in battle. Instead, he worked for the Seabees, landscaping, laying concrete sidewalks, floors for the mess hall, and wheeling the barrels for the cement. In his free time, he liked to walk on the beach and look for seashells. On some of his walks, he found a few bombs, but threw them away because he didn't know if they were loaded or not. While he was working, he heard word that one of his generals was shot, so they bombed a nearby Japanese island. While working in the supply shop, he heard the bombing all around him. One day, there was a ground defense raid, and all of the soldiers had to get up in the middle of the night and hide in the foxhole till the raid was done in a few hours. This kind of lifestyle carried on for a month or so. He was again shipped to a new island. On this ship, him and his fellow soldiers were assigned duties in the storage hold. For dorming, they were placed in the bow of the port side, which was very small and crowded. Conrad remembered being the 5th sack up. While on the ship, the radio played throughout, just loud enough so everyone could hear. The soldiers always had duties to do on the ship, and one day they had to throw all of the old meat overboard. It almost made them all throw up. It was one of the dirtiest ships he traveled on. The ship was filled with machinery, like trucks and cranes, on the deck, so it was difficult for the men to move around very much. Throughout the journey, he and the other troops were repeatedly loading and unloading equipment on and off the ship. But Conrad always had his cherry, pineapple, or tomato juice to get him through the day of working in the storage area. The date of March 28, 1945, he arrived at Saipan Island at 2 o'clock. The first thing he noticed about the island was that it looked like a Christmas tree at night with all the lights. The weather was hot, muggy, and it rained every day on the island, sometimes twice. The troops were put in large tents, which were sufficient enough for them, but they all leaked. The soldiers tried to move around throughout the night to stay dry, but to no avail. The troops were constantly bit by mosquitoes throughout the night, so the next day they went to get sleeping nets. Although the nets worked well, the tents still continued to leak. Due to this issue, the troops decided to go to Guam to sleep, even though they weren't supposed to. He rarely stayed on the same island for an extended period of time. Again, he was shipped back to the Marshall Islands on a good ship this time, the USMS Cornelius Vanderbilt, on April 5th. He described food as heavenly and went into detail about what he ate. Different from the other ships, he did not have to work on this one, which made it a lot more comfortable for him. Back in the Marshall area on Perry Island, they got new tents to sleep in. Conrad still had holes which created leaking problems, so he painted over them to fix the leaking. On April 14th, the mailman told Conrad that his brother was at a transfer unit near the island, so he went the next day to visit and spent all day with him. The island he was stationed at had no trees at all and was incredibly bare. This caused the weather to be very extreme. Various windstorms of different degrees often hit the island, in addition to rainstorms. The winds carried sand everywhere, even if the men were completely covered. Also, the temperatures were hardly bearable, usually around 90 to 100 degrees Fahrenheit. However, they reached as high as 138 degrees. He started to work in the salvage department taking apart planes. They saved most of the inside equipment and the wings of the aircraft. The good parts were kept and the scraps were thrown into the ocean. In addition to his work on the airplanes, he also did a lot of maintenance work around the island. After around 2 months, he began working on the beach crew. There he worked from 6:30 a.m. to 7 at night, and got every 4th day off. He didn't complain and was even getting a nice tan on the job. He had been working on the beach crew for about a month, and he took a strong liking to it. The work kept him very busy, but he was near the warm water which made him feel refreshed. Different workers received different foods too. For example, parachute riggers got a case of chicken soup and a case of pineapple, while the beachmen got 2 cases of pears instead. Because of his hard work and skills that he had shown over the past month, he was promoted to beach master. After he was done working on the islands, him and a lot of other troops caught a flight to Pearl Harbor, which took 11.5 hours of travel. From there, he was placed into receiving ships to be transferred back home. He and other soldiers were there 5 days. They left Pearl Harbor on the 5th and arrived back into the States. He went to San Francisco until the 18th and was officially discharged March 24, 1946. After the war, he continued his work in carpeting as if nothing had changed, except it had. He also went on to marry Celeste Michewski and had 4 kids, 3 daughters, Amy, Selena, and Gabriel, and a son, Patrick. Additionally, he had 9 grandchildren, Jamie, Amanda, and Sean Harris, Jordan and Hunter Sullivan, Courtney, Cassie, and Taylor Stefanik, and Molly Merritt. He was an amazing role model and always cracking jokes. Sadly, on September 26, 2012, Conrad Stefanik passed away in his sleep. He will always be remembered by his family for being a loving and caring man, and by others for his honorable works in World War II.